Did you graduate from high school?
I graduated from Eldora Providence High School in 1994.
And did you receive any additional schooling?
Yes, I got my bachelor's degree in occupational safety and health, and I have a master's degree in organizational leadership.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm the human resources manager at American Packaging Corporation in Story City, Iowa.
Now, you indicated earlier that you lived with Amy Mullis.
Yes.
Who is Amy Mullis?
Amy is my sister, my younger biological sister.
Do you know Amy's birthday?
Amy's birthday was January 23rd, 1979.
Yes.
Jeff, I'm handing you State's Exhibit 1. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes, that's my sister, Amy.
And is this a true and accurate depiction of Amy and what she appeared to be prior to November 2018?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would ask permission to publish this to the jury.
Before you publish it, we should have it offered first. Are you offering it into evidence? Any objection? No, Your Honor. State's Exhibit 1 is admitted, and you may publish.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jeff, I'm showing on the screen what's been marked and offered into evidence as Exhibit number 1.
Yes.
Is that a photograph of Amy?
Yes, it is.
Did Amy work?
She had been a registered nurse, and she had left that to work on the farm with the family farm.
And did Amy graduate from the same high school as you?
Yes.
And what high school was that?
Eldora New Providence High School.
What kind of things did Amy like to do?
Amy loved being outside, hunting, fishing, playing golf, but her biggest pride and joy was being a mom to her kids.
And you indicate, how many kids did Amy have?
Amy had 3 children.
And what are their names?
Tristan, Taylor, and Wyatt.
And their last name?
Mullis.
Do you know Todd Mullis?
Yes.
And do you see Todd Mullis in court today?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you please point to him and identify an article of clothing that he's wearing in court today?
He's wearing a green-gray shirt.
Your Honor, may the record reflect an in-court identification of the defendant by this witness.
It will.
Thank you. Now, you indicated that Amy, prior to her death, was actually working on the farm. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And prior to that, what kind of work did Amy do outside of the home?
She was a registered nurse.
And where did she go to school for nursing?
Kirkwood.
Now, you indicated that you met Todd Mullis.
Yes.
When did you first meet Todd Mullis?
I met Todd shortly after I got out of the Navy. It would have been 2003 or 2004 in that time frame.
And do you recall what year Amy and Todd got married?
I believe they got married in 2004.
What was the nature of your relationship with Amy like?
Amy and I had a good relationship. We would call and text. We got together on holidays and family events. I would go see some of her kids' events. She would come see some of my kids' events. We had a good relationship.
Who are your parents?
My parents are Robert Fuller and Peggy Munson.
And so would it be fair to say that Robert Fuller is your father?
Yes.
And where does Robert Fuller live?
He lives on the farm that we grew up on.
And is Robert married currently?
Yes.
And who is he married to?
Yes, he's married to Eileen Fuller.
And you indicated that your mother's name is Peggy Munson?
Yes.
And where does your mother live?
My mom lives in Ankeny with her husband, Randy Munson.
Did you and Amy ever talk about her relationship with Todd?
Occasionally. Back in around the time that Wyatt was born, which she said that she had not been happy and she was just not happy back then.
How old is Wyatt currently?
Wyatt is 9.
And how old is Taylor Mullis?
Taylor's 11.
And how old is Tristan Mullis?
Tristan is 14.
Now, you indicated that you had this conversation with Amy when Wyatt was born.
Right around the time he was born.
And where did that conversation take place?
I think it was at my dad's house, but I'm not positive.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to sometime around August 2018.
Yes.
Around that time, was there anything going on in your family?
Yes.
What was going on?
Our grandma, Margaret, who is my mom's mother, had fallen and was in the hospital in Des Moines. And the prognosis was not good. Amy had gone to the hospital the day before I had gotten there, and then I met Amy outside of the hospital when we got there.
Jeff, let me just stop you there.
Yes.
So would it be fair to say that you and Amy were visiting your grandmother who was in the hospital?
Yes.
Now, at some point while you were at the hospital, did you have a conversation with Amy?
Yes.
And where in the hospital did this conversation take place?
We were outside the emergency room exit. She met me there. Me and my wife. She was going to escort us up to Grandma's room.
Was your wife present for this conversation?
Yes.
And what's your wife's name?
Morgan.
And what, if anything, during that conversation did Amy tell you?
Your Honor, I'll object. Calls for hearsay.
You want to respond, Ms. Hughes?
Judge, I believe based on the response to all of these statements that these statements are all admissible or are pursuant to the case law as well as the rules of evidence.
Well, if you want to tell me specifically what rule you think creates the exception, it would be hearsay. If there's an exception, if you want to tell me what the rule is.
Judge, first, the state's position is that it's not hearsay because it's to show the state of mind of the victim and to show that she was fearful of the defendant, not that the actual acts happened that he's about to testify to, Your Honor. And then further than that, I think that if Your Honor does believe that they're for the truth of the matter asserted, it does go towards the victim's state of mind, its present sense impression, and it also falls under the residual hearsay rule that we did file a notice of.
Without having heard the testimony of the witness, but believing I understand, I believe he's going to give testimony about the present sense impression or the then existing state of mind of the declarant. I'm going to overrule the objection for now and let him answer. Do you remember the question?
Yes.
Go ahead, you can answer.
So that conversation, when my wife and I approached Amy, she said that she was planning on getting a divorce and she was going to leave Todd, and that he was going to flip out.
Did she tell you when she would be leaving Todd?
At that time, she said it'd be a little bit later after the crops were out of the field.
Did she indicate to you that she was going to divorce Todd or just leave him?
She was going to divorce him.
Did your grandmother pass away from that time in the hospital?
Yes, she passed away that same day.
And shortly after your grandmother passed away, did you go anywhere to take care of her belongings?
Yes. My wife and I, my mother, her husband, and my aunts and uncles helped clean out Grandma's house in Eldora.
And were those all the people that were present on that day that were helping cleaning out the house?
Yes.
While that was happening, did you and Amy have a conversation?
Yes.
Was it just the two of you at that time?
I believe so. There may have been some people that overheard the conversation. We were all just around in the area.
What did Amy tell you then?
Okay. Amy asked me if she could store Grandma's couch and some chairs and lamps at my house so that she would have some furniture when she left Todd.
Did you then take any of that furniture?
Yes.
And where did you put it?
I stored it. I still have it in my garage. I had set it on some pallets and covered it with some tarps to keep the animals off of it.
And why did you keep that furniture?
So she would have furniture to, when she moved out, so she would have something to start off with.
During your conversation with Amy, did she say anything to you specifically during this conversation about Tristan, her son?
Yes. She said she was worried about Tristan because him and Todd were close, and when she left, she knew that Tristan would be angry with Amy for leaving.
When was the last time you spoke to Amy?
The last text message was the day before she was killed.
Would that be November 9th, 2018?
Yes.
And what was the nature of that conversation?
She had a procedure earlier in the week, and she had sent me a picture of a bruise on her arm from the IV that was not put in very well, apparently.
At any point, did you have a conversation with Amy about an argument or fight that she had with her mother-in-law?
Yes.
And how did that conversation take place? Was that in person or over the phone or text message?
That was over the phone.
And approximately when did that conversation take place?
It happened shortly after, it would have been sometime in October. We had been at the hospital with my uncle who had had a brain bleed. And Amy had come down. We were with Mom in the hospital to support her because she had just lost her mother, and now her brother was in the hospital, and it didn't look very good at the time.
Around this time, was Amy spending a lot of time in the Ankeny or Des Moines area?
Yes.
And what specifically did Amy tell you during that conversation?
During the conversation, after she'd gotten home, she went to pick up her kids from her mother-in-law, and she said that her mother-in-law was talking very negatively at her, telling her that Amy had been abandoning her children and didn't deserve to be a mother and was just a horrible person.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please tell me again when your grandma had the fall and her resulting death.
That would have been August of 2018.
And after that, your uncle had some type of a medical issue too.
Yes, that's correct.
What was his name?
Jerry Granzo.
And do you know where he was hospitalized for this medical issue?
Yes, he was hospitalized in Des Moines.
Do you recall approximately how long he would have been in the hospital?
He was in the hospital for a few weeks, and then he went to On With Life to help with his recovery.
During the time that he was in the hospital or at On With Life, did you visit him?
Yes.
Did Amy?
Yes.
Do you have an estimate of how many times Amy might have visited?
I don't know how many times she went. I know the one time was the last time I saw her alive. We went out for supper with my mom to help support her during that time.
So every time you visited your uncle, it didn't necessarily coincide with a visit from Amy?
That would be correct, yes.
So really, you'd only be able to guess how many times she might have visited?
I could guess, but I don't have an answer.
Do you know if there were ever any times that Amy combined a visit to her uncle and her mom with activities that Taylor was engaged in, the tumbling, I believe, that she participated in?
I don't know if she did that or not.
Okay. And you believe it was sometime in October that Amy told you about having a run-in with Todd's mom?
Yes, I remember we had just left Uncle Jerry's, the hospital that he was in, and I had gotten home, and she got home the day after, I believe, and she called me.
Did she ever talk to you again about and tell you that Todd had actually stood up for her and criticized his mother for doing what she did?
No, I think that might have been the last time I talked to her in person before she was killed.
Were you aware that Amy had had this affair about 5 years ago?
No.
Were you aware up until the time of her death that she was having an affair?
No.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Sir, can you spell Uncle Jerry's last name for the record?
Granzow.
Okay, thank you. You're free to step down.
Thank you.
Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat. State your name and spell it for the record, please.
Eileen Fuller, EILEENFULLER.
Go ahead, counsel.
You indicated your name is Eileen Fuller.
Correct.
Could you tell us how old you are?
54.
Where do you currently live?
Iowa Falls, Iowa.
Where did you grow up?
Strawberry Point, Iowa.
And where did you go to school?
Starmont High School.
What is your current occupation?
Sales and advertising.
Are you currently married?
I am.
And who are you married to?
Robert Fuller.
Do you have any children?
I do.
And who are your children?
Whitney Gam and Zachary Converse.
And when did you and Robert Fuller get married?
2004.
And does Robert have any children?
He does.
And who are his children?
Jeffrey Fuller and Amy Fuller.
When you first met Amy, when was that?
In 2002.
How did you meet Amy?
I met her through a mutual friend.
And what kind of a relationship did you have with Amy?
We were friends.
And when you first met Amy, her name was Amy Fuller.
Fuller.
And what kind of things would you and Amy do together?
Go to dances. She'd come to my house. We'd barbecue, swimming. I mean, just did a lot of everything together.
During that time when you first became friends with Amy, did you meet Todd Mullis?
Not for a while.
And how was it that you did meet Todd Mullis?
Through Amy.
And how did you meet your current husband, Robert Fuller?
Through Amy.
Do you recall when you met Todd Mullis?
I'm going to say that I met Todd in July of 2003.
And when did Todd and Amy get married?
Todd and Amy were married September 11th, 2004.
And when were you and Bob or Robert Fuller married?
July 31st, 2004.
So just a little over a month before, you and Bob got married a little bit over a month before Todd and Amy.
Correct.
Did you have a relationship with the defendant, a friendship or relationship? How did you get along?
Todd
Yes.
and I got along fine.
And when you initially moved on into the farm in Eldora, would Todd spend any time on the farm?
He did.
And in what capacity?
He and his father rented the ground, so they were there twice a year to put in the crops and take out the crops.
Were you aware several years ago, about 5 years ago, that Amy had an affair?
I was.
And how did you find out about that affair?
I found out through Amy.
After that affair, what did you observe about Todd and Amy's relationship?
We didn't see them a whole lot. They seemed to be working things out.
After that, after you found out about that first affair, do you remember a time when you had a conversation with the defendant?
I do.
And approximately how long after that affair was this conversation?
I'm going to say right around 2.5 years after.
And where did that conversation take place?
In my kitchen.
Was anybody else present for that conversation?
It was just Todd and I. The rest of the family was in the basement watching TV. It was a holiday. They were watching football.
What did the defendant, Todd, say to you at that time?
He said, "Eileen, do you know what Amy did?" And I said, "Yes, Todd, I do." And I said to him, "It looks like you're working things out."
Did he then say anything else to you?
He did. He said, "Well, I have to." He said, "I'm not going to lose my farm and what I've worked for."
Now, in the summer and fall of 2018, did Amy have anything going on in her life that you were aware of?
In 2018?
Yes.
Yes. Amy was having some health issues at the time.
And was there anything going on with her mother's side of the family?
Yes, yes.
What-
She had lost her grandmother.
And was anybody else in her family also in the hospital?
Yes. Not long after her grandma died, I know that her uncle had an aneurysm.
And were you aware of where Amy was spending a lot of time then?
She was down in Des Moines at the hospital, I was told, spending a lot of time with her, helping with her uncle.
Now, at the same time that Amy was dealing with these family issues, did you have contact with the defendant?
Todd had called me several times and discussing, worried about Amy not being home.
Now, you said he called you. Would he call you on your cell phone?
Correct.
And did you guys communicate any other way?
Texting, he would text me.
And did Todd say anything to you about Amy spending so much time at the hospital?
Yes.
What did he say to you?
He just said, she needs to be home helping with the kids. It was a very wet fall. I know he was trying to get the crops out. I know it was very aggravating. The kids were there, so he had a lot on his plate.
How often would the defendant call you?
Most of it was through texting. He did call on occasion.
And did you make any observations of the defendant behavior or how he was when he would talk to you or send you these text messages?
Mostly angry, just frustrated, anger.
And did these conversations with the defendant go on for a couple of months?
Yes.
And did the defendant, Todd, ever talk to you about his relationship with Amy?
He just said that they were obviously having issues. He didn't go into extreme detail, no.
At some point, did you have a conversation with Todd about him suspecting that Amy was having another affair?
Yes.
And was that, if you recall, were those text messages or phone calls?
Both.
And specifically, what did the defendant Todd say to you about that?
He just said he had confronted the field manager. I didn't really catch a name that he specified. It was his field manager, and he said that he had asked him about it. He had confronted he and Amy both.
And did he tell you what led him to confront them about it?
He said that via her phone, he could tell that, she was contacting him. They were contacting each other.
And at any point, did the defendant ask you for advice or ask you what you thought he should do about it?
He did, yes.
And what, if anything, did you tell him?
I said, I don't know, Todd. If that was me, I guess I would talk to his wife. I didn't. That's what I would do.
At that point, did you know who this person was that Todd was alleging she was having an affair with?
No.
Had you ever met him, or did you even know his name?
No.
Did Todd ever tell you about a fight between Amy and his mother?
Yes.
And again, was that text or phone calls or both?
He had texted me and said that Amy and his mother had just gotten into a fight. That was basically it.
Did he tell you anything else about that fight?
Something about his mother and Amy had, I'm not sure why Amy was there, what that situation was. He just said that our mom kicked Amy out of the house, meaning her home.
Can I just have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Ma'am, when Todd and you first talked about the first affair that Amy had, I believe you've told us, and perhaps today I missed it, that this happened 2 or 3 years, the conversation with you and Todd, after that had occurred?
Correct. About around 2.5 years. I didn't write the dates down.
When that conversation occurred several years ago, You said it was a family, maybe a holiday gathering?
Thanksgiving, correct.
Amy and the kids there?
Correct.
In your opinion, did Todd love his children?
Yes.
Love his career, his farm life?
Yes, very much.
Hard worker?
Very hard.
And you saw evidence of that because him and his dad rented ground from your family.
Correct.
Moving ahead then to late summer, or summer, August, September of last year, 2018, you said Todd communicated with you with concerns about Amy being absent from the home.
Correct.
And that was due to health issues of both grandma and uncle.
Correct.
You mentioned his plate full. Crops coming out about that time of year.
Correct.
Do you know how much land the Mullis, Todd's operation was?
I don't exactly. I know they have quite a bit of land.
Pretty substantial.
Right, and renting and vice versa, yes.
And it sounds like from what you're telling us, that Amy was doing this family health issue visits without the kids going with her.
I can't say that for 100%. I know all the time that she was there, but I know when Todd had talked to me, they were at home.
So Todd's got the 3 kids and farm and weather issues and so forth. You said he was angry, frustrated?
He seemed angry, frustrated, yes.
But is this also about the time that he told you that he had some suspicions again about Amy's fidelity?
Correct.
And that he had talked to this farm manager?
He said he had talked to him, yes.
Did he seem satisfied that the explanation he got explained things?
Objection calls for speculation.
I'm going to let her answer yes or no. Do you understand the question?
Can you repeat that, please?
Did it appear that Todd seemed satisfied with the explanation he had received from this farm manager?
He didn't say either way. He just said he had asked him, confronted him.
But you then encouraged him to contact this man's wife?
He asked me what I would do. I said, I guess if it was me, I would talk to his wife.
Do you know if he did that?
I do not.
And then you told us this morning that Amy shared with you that she had, I'll call it a run-in with Todd's mom.
Todd told me that.
Right. And the issue was Amy's absence from the home. Was that kind of the...
Sounded like that was the basis of the argument, yes.
Did you ever talk to Todd about that?
No, I don't. He had just told me that his mom had kicked her out. That's about the extent of that.
Did he also tell you that he confronted his mom about what she had said and done with Amy?
I don't believe so. I don't recall that.
Okay. You're not saying it didn't happen, he just...
Right.
You mentioned that Todd had made a comment to you back at this holiday thing a few years after the first affair that he didn't want to lose the farm. Isn't it true that he also added that he didn't want his family to be split up?
No, he didn't say that. He said, I'm not going to lose my farm and everything I've worked for.
Maybe this is incidental here, but the farm ground that Todd and his dad rented, who did that belong to?
Robert Fuller Sr.,
Amy's dad,
Amy's grandfather.
grandfather, I'm sorry. And where did this land situate? Where was it located?
Between Iowa Falls and Eldora,
Okay.
Iowa.
And this was in the vicinity where you live?
Correct?
Okay. You said that they would come out, put the crop in, come back, take the crop out.
Correct?
Would you have contact with them on either one of those occasions?
Sure.
Okay. Any recollection of any concern or concern that Todd shared with you about his life with Amy, the kids, or anything like that?
You'll have to rephrase that. I'm not sure what you're asking me.
It was not a good question. During those encounters that when they would be there for farming purposes only, not family gatherings or anything, did you ever have any personal conversations with Todd then about family issues?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. That's all I have.